Hey there, my name is Porsha Lauri. Welcome to or welcome back to my YouTube channel, and welcome to 2021. This is the first video that I am recording and editing and uploading in the year of 2021, so I'm hoping to really kick this year off with a bang. If you've spent any amount of time on my channel, then you might notice that one of the best performing videos on my channel has been about Boy Meets World. And in that video, I kind of talked about all the flaws that are within the show, like timeline issues, characters that appear and then disappear, and things of that nature that just didn't make sense to me. I've gotten a lot of subscribers just from that video alone, which thank you, I appreciate you so much. I'm hoping to bring so much more content that's similar to that to this channel. As I was trying to figure out how I would deliver more Boy Meets World content without being too repetitive, I decided that I would kind of make a best and worst list. But as I was going through episodes, I realized that I had a really hard time narrowing down, so I've decided to kind of compromise, and I'm breaking it down into categories. If you enjoy watching me talk about all things pop culture, TV shows, movies, music, whatever, do me a solid and drop a like on this video, then run over to that subscribe button and hit the bell next to it so you can be notified every time I upload. So let's just jump right into it. Maybe this year I'll also stop using Philip DeFranco's catchphrases. One of the things that I really enjoy about Boy Meets World is how they so easily kind of mix really high emotional roller coaster episodes with these really big slapsticky episodes. To me, it's a great mix of both comedy as well as drama. So for this video, here are the following categories that I put all the episodes in. We have the early episodes, two-parter episodes, educational episodes, emotional episodes, and the best cameo. So the first category I'm going to be talking about is the young or early episodes of Boy Meets World. So my favorite early young episodes would be on a mission to get a date to an upcoming dance, a typical storyline for early seasons. Corey is desperate for female attention, but doesn't feel special enough to deserve any. When some guys at Chubby's ask the boys to watch their gear while they use the facilities, they learn that instruments equals girls, giving the musicians newfound fame. But the road to success is a precarious one. Along the way, Corey assembles a group of faux bandmates and they begin touring their best pickup lines around the school, and then suddenly their big break comes as their first gig as the Exits. It's scrambled to derail the performance from happening since, you know, they can't actually play, but alas, they have to play the dance, and they play the name game and basically ruin the entire dance. It's not anything but silly and full of great one-liners. There is a lot of slapstick episodes, but this is honestly a staple to me. Now, what I like about this episode is that it's just super silly. Of course, the end result is like, you should be yourself. You shouldn't try to be something you're not, yada, yada, yada. But it's also just a really fun slapstick episode. I just like the idea of them carrying around these big guitar cases and carrying a sandwich inside of them. I just think this is so quintessential teen TV show. And also with this episode, like, this creates kind of a running theme for Corey in the early seasons. Corey just really struggles to like fit in. So of course Corey became this like super lovable character over time because he was the every guy. You know, he didn't get the best grades in school, he wasn't great at sports, he was just really, really average. So I wouldn't say that like the Corey and Topanga romance really gets hot until like season 4. So the first few seasons we really get to see Corey just being himself, being alone and trying to figure out how to fit in. And for my worst episode, I have to go with Mr. Turner, remember him, assigns a class a project having to do with Much Ado About Nothing, talking to friends and family about their views on love and sex. Everyone is put into boy-girl pairs featuring our faves, Corey and Topanga. Surprising to no one, Corey isn't taking any of this seriously, and this causes them to work on their project late into the night at school. But like how? After accidentally falling asleep while editing, the pair is found by janitor Bud and an angry Mr. Feeney. Fast forward through a short lecture, and word has gotten around school giving Corey a godlike reputation, and all the while Topanga's good girl image has been tainted. Ultimately, Corey comes clean about what really happened to restore Topanga's good name. The problem with this episode, though, is that they wasted an opportunity to have a real discussion about sexism and sex-positive conversations. For me, the problem with this episode isn't really the episode. It's more the message behind the episode that I have a problem with. Start a conversation that could be improved upon about talking about how we talk about women's sexuality, how we talk about sexuality in general, and especially with our youth. It just felt like they had this opportunity to say something a little bit more powerful, and in reality they didn't really do much of anything. We could have spent time talking about why Corey became a god and Topanga's a tramp. So I put this at the bottom of the list because really it was just a missed opportunity. It's not an episode I hate per se, but I definitely think that they could have done more with the storyline. So now we move into sad emotional episodes, and let me tell you, this one took me so long to narrow down. It was so hard to find a best and worst for this category because the entire show is just filled with these episodes. And to be honest, the emotional roller coaster episodes are usually my favorite episodes to watch because you see so much growth and development from each character. But I eventually found a best and a worst. So let's start with the best. Sean and Jack are about to have some coffee together when the pair run into Chet, of all people, running the kids dry at the student lounge pool table, which does not surprise me at all. After a quick hello, Sean wins back the students' money and the three head off for a steak dinner. Sean's sulking all the while, but the reason is unspoken. Back at the apartment, Sean chastises Jack for paying at dinner and repeating over and over how Chet will leave the second he finds something better to do. This riles up everyone, including Eric and Rachel, who have joined the party with cake. He finally lets his dad have it. He's done with the promises and running away and the feeling like he is now becoming his father despite all of this. Unfortunately, as Chet begins to respond, he has a heart attack. The remainder of the episode is played out in the hospital. The brothers still fighting over money, and the Who Feels Worse contest continues, while all other characters start showing up at the hospital in support of them. Corey gives Sean some encouragement to mend things with Chet while he's still here, which turns out to be pretty ominous foreshadowing. Sean does get everything out in the open to Jack during another fight, but Chet was awake and listening. Sean asks Chet if he was the reason that he always left, and Chet professes that he just never felt good enough for Sean. The two hug it out, and Chet is able to give Jack his final birthday gift, but seconds after, he suffers a second heart attack and passes. It's a rough watch. As far as emotional episodes, I mean, it doesn't get more emotional than losing someone. And we're at season 6, so we've had 5 seasons of watching Sean have his dad, not have his dad, have his dad, not have his dad. And I had really wondered at this point, what was Chet's problem? Of course, I can make the assumption that, he probably felt like not good enough for Sean, and that's why he was never around. This episode verified all of those things that I had been suspecting. Ryder Strong, actor that plays Sean, did such a great job with delivering this. When I'm watching that episode, I forget it's a TV show, I forget it's an episode, and I genuinely feel like he's going through this. I felt like they built up this storyline for so many years, and we finally got to see Sean really talk to his dad about why he was never around. The climax of Chet ultimately passing at the end of the episode is actually really full circle. It kind of makes everything that happened up until this point make a lot more sense. And even though it's really sad, and even though Sean really did deserve to have a dad at some point, he had so many fatherly figures that I knew that Sean would be okay in the end. By the end of this episode, I feel more like the loose ends have been tied up, and I feel like kind of a relief that all of that stuff is off of Sean's chest. This episode really, they went the extra mile. I think that the writing is really great. It feels really relatable. I don't feel like it's overly morbid or that they spend too much time really in that moment of Chet passing. It's more just like a 1-2 punch. The rest of the season is really Sean kind of dealing with the aftermath of losing his father. And the fact that he ends up taking off for a while too really makes sense with the show, because that's how Chet was, and that's why Sean resents Chet so much, is because he's kind of turning into him while simultaneously trying to not turn into him. A really great pivotal turn for Sean. And of all the actors on this show, I have a really great respect for both Will Friedle and Ryder Strong. I think that they had some of the more emotional and hard to deal with storylines, and they played them out with such grace and such vulnerability that it really sells the performance. So for my worst sad emotional episode, this was pretty hard. When they pull on those heartstrings, they fucking pull on those heartstrings. But here's an episode I could care less for. Cory is finally turning 16 and cannot wait to spend the birthday with Sean and Topanga, and most importantly, on the open road with a brand new license. Meanwhile, Alan thinks he's having a big bonding birthday with Cory and is looking forward to taking his son to the DMV to celebrate. But Cory has taken the initiative and already went without him. Alan tries to play it off as if this doesn't hurt him, but it's clear to everyone he is disappointed. Then when Cory asks if he can take the car to go out of state and see an R-rated movie, skipping the family birthday dinner as per tradition, Alan begins having a mini meltdown. Ultimately, Cory goes to the dinner, but another fight erupts as Alan is still trying to manipulate ways to keep Cory home. None of it seems to work. Cory, Topanga, and Sean finally get the keys and off to Atlantic City they go, at the pace of a snail. Sean persuades Cory to kick that gas up a notch and go a little bit above 20 miles per hour, which results in sirens. The kids are taken to a nearby courthouse where Cory is being charged with going 1 mile over the speed limit. Cory pleads his case to Judge Lamb that 1 mile should not equal jail, but Judge Lamb is no pushover. Shout out to the Wonder Years, Dan Lauria, hello. But he does give Cory an out. If he calls his father and apologizes, he'll let him go. Cory refuses and calls Mr. Feeney, who obviously tells Alan and Amy, and off Alan is to go save Cory. The episode is really about growing up and becoming an adult and how hard that transition is for parents too. The problem, Alan doesn't really come out with how he feels and plays games to get Cory to do what he wants. For Alan, this seems really out of character. I see him as a pretty emotionally open father, but I think in this episode, he could have resolved this by doing less assuming and more talking. So yeah, with this episode, it just feels really out of character. To me, Cory is acting more like angsty teen than he normally does. Cory doesn't really strike me as like the angsty teen character most of the time, you know, that's really reserved for Sean and Eric sometimes. But Alan seems out of sorts in this episode. Something I really enjoy about Alan is that he's not only just the breadwinner for the family, you know, he actually is emotionally there for his kids. He's supportive. He's genuinely a good father figure, a good dad. But in this episode, it seems like he doesn't know his own kids or has like completely forgotten how to talk to them. By 16, it's pretty normal for a kid to not really want to hang out with their parents so much. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a good or bad thing. I would just say that that's extremely normal. And the best way to conquer this would be to talk to your kid about it and compromise, which is a trait that Alan is really naturally good at. So the fact that he doesn't do that in this episode is kind of like, that's weird. And Alan and Amy aren't the type to really tell their kids like, go do this. They merely make suggestions most of the time. They try to coax their kids into making the right decisions as opposed to telling them what the right decisions are and then making the decision for them. It's kind of bewildering that in this episode, Alan all of a sudden can't do that. In a later episode, Cory wants to play basketball with Alan, but Alan is tired from having played basketball with Eric. And that episode just ultimately talks about Alan having two different relationships with his two different sons and how he has to learn to balance it. And that the same attention and the same topics that he talks about with Cory should be talked about with Eric and vice versa. So I guess that episode does further show you that there is a disconnect in how he relates with Cory, but still this episode doesn't really portray Alan as being true to or authentic to himself. So now we're getting into educational episodes. For my best, it's going to be something I mentioned in my previous Boy Meets World video is my love for the character Eric and his storyline. I think, next to Sean, he is the most dynamic character with the most relatable arc. When we meet Eric, it's established that he is very charming and attractive, but lacks some motivation and is generally a little dumb, which leads him to be the comic relief. What I enjoy about watching him grow is seeing him overcome his insecurities regarding faith in himself and his abilities. A common storyline, obviously, but done in a way that felt true to the character and not necessarily over the top. In By Hook or By Crook, he is tutored by a girl per Feeney's request, and she tells Eric he isn't smart enough to pass anyway, so she corrects his test to get him to pass. Eric does the right thing and goes to Feeney, whom praises Eric for his truthfulness and encourages him that he is more than qualified to be a good student. This is basically the foundation for Feeney and Eric's relationship. This is seen again in Security Guy when Eric retakes his SATs. Eric eventually calls Feeney his mentor once we're like post-high school and maintains a close, almost grandfatherly relationship with him. This is a common thread with Alan and Eric as well, especially in the episode aptly titled You Can Go Home Again. Eric takes Corey on a road trip to celebrate his graduation and transition into adulthood, but almost doesn't return home in an effort to avoid and run away from his unknown future. Alan shows up, convinces him to return, and I think this is also why Alan lets Eric work at the shop for so long as well, to give Eric a guarantee that he will always have something to lean back on. Another reoccurring theme is Eric's generosity and passion for helping others, like Uncle Daddy when Eric dates a single mother, or Santa's Little Helpers in the introduction of Tommy. Then again later in that season, Eric almost adopts Tommy in Can I Help to Cheer You? Even the Plays with Squirrels era has glimmers of surprisingly in-depth moments with Eric, but ultimately destroys a lot of the growth he made with slapstick and poorly written side plots. But Eric really goes through a lot of trials and tribulations. I feel like he's the best written character on the show. I don't know if anyone else feels. What do you guys think? Tell me in the comments below. Who's the best character on the show? I feel like the best character, I'm supposed to say Corey because the show is really based around his perspective most of the time. But I've always thought Eric was way more interesting, had way more depth. He had just more going on. Corey's whole angle the entire show is basically like married to Topanga. And there's nothing wrong with that. Don't get me wrong. The romantic in me loves Corey. But I thought Eric had a more well-rounded and interesting timeline on the show. Except the last like 2 seasons. I don't know when exactly the shift started. Eric's always been the not super bright character, and then he just became all 3 Stooges rolled into one. And I don't know what studio exec decided that that was a good idea, but I'm letting you know from my perspective, it wasn't. I really don't care for the Plays with Squirrels era. I really don't care for him in the last season at all. Yeah, semi-ruining Corey and Topanga's wedding. I was waiting for that wedding for 5 years. For 5 years we were waiting for them to get married. But for that wedding to kind of end the way it did, I wanted more for them. I wanted a perfect wedding and we didn't get that. And it's because they wrote in that Eric basically ruins everything. I don't know why they decided to take the character in that direction. I just feel like they didn't utilize Eric for the way that they had in earlier seasons. I think that they saw that people enjoyed him and thought he was really funny, and so they decided to really lean into that, and I think that was the wrong direction for the character. I've seen a lot that people really enjoy Seven the Hard Way, where he turns into Plays with Squirrels and he's like, lose one friend, lose them all, whatever. I enjoy just that sequence and just that quote. I think that quote is really great, and it's something that you could live by. I definitely get that, but that's not my favorite era of Eric. Actually, those episodes in particular, I don't even care for. But like I said, I didn't want to focus on just shitting on the last season. We can do that another time if you want to. Let's move on to the worst episode. So for my worst educational episode, I have to go with... So Topanga's in possession of the infamous Lauren from the ski trip letter after it accidentally dropped from his bag. Against her better judgment and a little encouragement from Angela's nosiness, opens it to find out about the secret kiss that happened between Corey and the aforementioned woman, making their relationship damn near extinguished. Meanwhile, Sean is in the new honeymoon phase with Angela and cannot wait until Valentine's Day and all the activity he's planned for them, much to the chagrin of his previous love interest Dana Pruitt and some other girls that I don't really remember. Anyway, the girl gang kidnap their former paramour and keep Sean hostage to withhold any future wrongdoings he might do against Angela or other women, I guess. Angela goes to Jack and Eric's, but Sean isn't there. When she goes to Corey, he believes something isn't right because Sean was looking forward to this night and would not stand Angela up. Eric then calls from the boathouse where Sean is, and Corey and Angela head down there. After Corey makes a speech about trust, ironically, Topanga appears, and she's moved by the speech, but not enough to forgive the cheating bastard. Sean apologizes to his former flames, then tells Angela she's different and wants to move slower as to not hurt her, as he has the girls that kidnapped him. They break up to be friends in the aftermath. The problem with this episode is just the general situation is quite ridiculous and semi-psychotic. Oh, and the sub-storyline just completely tear apart my heart, why don't you? Corey sitting at Chubby's waiting for Topanga just literally crushes my soul. The dissolution of a long-running romance between the two leads painted against the newness of Sean's relationship is unfair. Also, Jack and Eric leave with two high school kids when they are clearly both adults, and that's a different topic, not for this video. My problem with this episode is that I don't know what the purpose was, and I think that the end result is like, what? Why did you do this? Also, yeah, could they not get the girl who played Veronica Watson to come back for this episode? Because that would have been way more interesting. Because, okay, so the girl gang that steals Sean away or kidnaps him, I guess is the better way to put it, into the boathouse. Alex Mack, that girl that tried to keep Sean and Corey apart, and then some random girl that I don't remember from any episode ever to exist. So like, why couldn't they have replaced that girl with Veronica Watson? Because that would have made a more distinct impression on me, because I would have remembered that girl. You know what I'm saying? These girls literally kidnap a human being. Like, I know they're all minors, but they kidnap another human being. And the end result is that Sean and Angela break up. I get that Sean is afraid of hurting Angela, but I don't think the solution has to be that they need to break up and be friends before they date again. Like, whatever, who cares? Like, you can be friends and be in a relationship. So honestly, that's the only reason it's on the list, is just that I wasn't clear on what they were trying to educate us on about relationships. And I really didn't get anything out of this episode besides the fact that Corey and Topanga are now broken up because he cheated on her. And now Sean and Angela are also broken up because Sean wants to get to know her better and can't do that while also making out from time to time. I don't get it. As you all know, if you've watched my previous Boy Meets World episode, you know how I feel about Sean and Angela, so you can understand the amount of rage I feel inside, because I just got re-upset about the whole... We need to move on. They don't even end up together in Girl Meets World. It's like... I just wanted them to be together forever. Corey and Topanga get to be together forever. Okay, I'm moving on. Okay, so the next category is two-parter episodes, which there are actually quite a few in this show. I love a good two-parter. I love when something ends on a cliffhanger and you have to wait till next week to find out what happens. Like, those are things you don't get from streaming anymore, and that's kind of something I genuinely miss. I just like being on the edge of my seat and wondering what's gonna happen next. A simpler time it was in the 90s, where we had a lot of cliffhanging episodes. But first, we're gonna talk about my favorite cliffhanger episodes. Eric spies Sean giving Topanga a peck on the lips, which, to play devil's advocate, does look pretty spicy, and he runs home to inform Corey. At first, Corey questions Sean to verify the legitimacy of Eric's claims, but things are not as they appear, and soon Corey is confronted with his absolute worst nightmare. Topanga is moving to Pittsburgh, and there seems to be no way to stop it. While Sean and Corey remain positive that the two are endgame, so she won't really leave, Amy becomes a little pot stirrer and encourages Corey to use this as an opportunity to meet new girls. For obvious reasons, this bothers Corey. When Topanga actually leaves, a part of Corey does too. Not to worry though, a rain-soaked runaway Topanga arrives at the Matthews because she just couldn't be without Corey anymore. A two-parter that pays off with Topanga being able to live with her aunt and stay to finish high school. It also opens the door to Amy's true feelings about Corey's longtime girlfriend, which is an underlying running theme between them. As someone who also considers themselves a romantic, Topanga showing up at the door is really heartwarming. The two, some might say 3-episode arc of the two getting engaged was a very, very close second. So what I mean by that, when they graduate high school, Topanga proposes, and it leaves the entire season on a cliffhanger. And for those of you who have only ever streamed things and never watched things in real time, they ended one season in June and then didn't finish that storyline until the following, September, when shows usually start re-airing again. So for those of us who watched Boy Meets World, we had to wonder for an entire summer, was Corey going to accept Topanga's proposal? Crazy, I know. TV was wild back in the day. But the thing I love about these episodes is that Corey and Topanga's love, while I know it's all fictitious, I just like this idea of caring about someone so much, and no matter what anyone says about their love, about their relationship, and whether or not what the future of it will look like, they maintain the same level of passion for each other regardless. And yeah, they do break up from time to time, but it's not because of other people's input. It's more has to do with how they're feeling in their own relationship. And I really respect that. I feel like that's something we don't see a lot. Usually when we see couples getting together or breaking up in TV shows, it's because word of mouth or things that they're hearing around them, or someone tells them that they should consider being single or they should be with this person. Whereas Corey and Topanga's relationship was really only about Corey and Topanga. It's not normal that high school relationships really work out, but I've been lucky enough to have friends who are married to their high school sweethearts. So I know that this story, while unique, isn't unrealistic completely. There are tons of couples that are like them, and I just love this storyline because it really shows that love can transcend all. Kudos to these two, because in a lot of relationships like this on TV, we find out behind the cameras and everything that the people are dating. But I think it's really interesting, and it's a testament to their acting ability, because while they went on one date as kids, just because they knew each other, that's how kids are, they never really got into a relationship. So for them to be able to portray this love story and make it come alive for so many people is just slow clap for them. That image of Topanga standing outside of their kitchen door just soaked in rain, does it get any more romantic than that? I don't think so. So now for my worst episodes, it's so funny because my favorite two-parter is talking about this couple and how their love story is so beautiful, and then the worst is literally the same couple. In the aftermath of Topanga's parents' announcement of their split, she decides to end her engagement and relationship with Corey, no longer believing love conquers all or that it's enough. Following suit, Angela ends her relationship with Sean because that's what sidekicks do, and the two girls begin planning a move into the apartment with Rachel. Because, shocker, Jack and Rachel also broke up. This is just very convenient storylining. But what they don't know is that Jack and Eric are going to kick Rachel out. This misunderstanding results in the dumbest battle of the sexes steel cage match and ends up with Jack and Eric getting kicked out on their butts, which I'm pretty sure Jack's the only guy on the lease. Maybe Jack and Eric are both on the lease. Meanwhile, Corey is up to his old Cupid tricks and decides to rope in Sean in an effort to reunite Rhiannon and Jedediah. Unfortunately, this blows up in his face and it ends up reopening scars, still attempting to heal. A real toss-up as to if this is a deeply emotional episode or a slapstick silly episode with a bunch of grown-ass adults wrestling. As well as Topanga's unsteadiness of the future of her relationship, it just seems a little unnecessary to tackle this topic again. This is episode 1 and 2 of season 7. They reunite an episode later. So what's the point of even breaking them up again? Then Angela and Sean break up. Literally, Angela breaks up with Sean because Corey and Topanga broke up. And that bothers me because, again, if they were in high school, could kind of understand. She's like 19 or 20. So like why would she still be following suit with like whatever Topanga decides is the same thing I'm gonna decide. And the last thing with this whole episode is like the fight over the apartment, which I know is supposed to be the lighthearted subplot of the episode, but it's just so dumb. Nor would it make sense for Rachel to assume that when her and Jack broke up that she would get the apartment. She was invited to live in that apartment. There's no reason that she has any ownership over said apartment. Yeah, I just genuinely don't enjoy those episodes just because like the plot line for both the main plot and the subplot is just completely ridiculous. To our final category, which is cameos. Sean is caught between Corey and Topanga's fallout following the snow trip fiasco and the dreaded Lauren, and he is starting to feel really helpless in the effort of getting them back together. During a seemingly normal day in class, an argument involving all our faves breaks out and Feeney gives them all detention. In detention, a slew of strange events happen, turning the day into a nightmare with Jack, Eric, and Jennifer Love Hewitt Pfefferman along for the ride. They each begin being killed off one by one, with Sean as our resident horror movie buff and Angela, and only Angela, supplying the gut-wrenching screams. The characters all pass blame from one to another after the janitor and Mr. Feeney are given the early axe and thus eliminating them from the suspect pool. The topic of Corey and Topanga's recent breakup keeps coming up, as well as Sean being seen as sort of caught in the middle. It finally gets down to Sean, Corey, and Topanga and the killer in a hooded shroud. Sean flips it and reveals he's the killer after all. Sean then wakes up realizing he fell asleep in class, to no one's surprise, and he tells Corey and Topanga that he has to stop blaming himself and let them figure it out. In a clear ode to the popular scary teen horror movies of the time, it's a funny and slightly creepy episode that, instead of coming out for Halloween, oddly came out in February. Actually, I think this episode came out right before First Girlfriends Club. The added bonus of a slightly deeper meaning, with Sean in part blaming himself for Corey and Topanga's breakup. Sean could always deliver the emotions even when the situation is really silly. Just think, like, the writing is so perfect. As a big fan of Scream and I Know What You Did Last Summer, I really appreciate all the odes to like the teen horror movies that were super popular in the late 90s. On top of all of that is that they have the cameo from Jennifer Love Hewitt, like it's the girl herself. I love that scene of her and Angela kind of having like the little mini scream off.
Yes, girl, I am the screamer around here.
I just enjoy this episode from start to finish. Also, like a sidebar, Eric makes a ton of South Park references in this episode. And my least favorite cameo episode is Corey wants to ask Topanga to be his girlfriend, but she's going to Florida after winning a school trip there. Corey decides to get a flight through one of Sean's various nefarious uncles without either parent's knowledge, as per usual. They track down Topanga relatively quickly, but Corey's new lady man reputation is a turnoff to her, and she keeps giving him the Heisman. After a talk with Dana from Step by Step and a conversation with a dolphin, he wins back Topanga's heart in true Disney fashion. Clearly a shameless plug for their own amusement park, but besides that, it's just poorly paced, boring, and too cliche, even by Disney standards. The kiss against the fireworks is nice, but it really just demeans Corey and Topanga's relationship overall. As I was rewatching episodes to decide, where I would place things and what episodes I would choose for what, this is one of those episodes where I watched it and I was like, where was I when this was airing? Because I legitimately don't really remember this episode. Even as I'm relaying it to you, I watched this episode to make this synopsis on it, and I can barely remember what happens in that episode now. It is so unremarkable. And I know I put it into the category of cameo, and so you might be wondering, who's the cameo? But if you ever watched a little show called Step by Step, then you would recognize Dana, that literally shows up for half a second and then we never see her again. And I just feel like that is such a wasted cameo. What was the point of this episode? Did you want to cross promote Step by Step alongside Disney World, which, like, we get it, we'll go to Disney World. So before I get out of here, there are a couple episodes that I just wanted to mention because I feel weird not mentioning it, but I really just wanted to take a quick note to talk about cult fiction and Boy Meets Real World. I think both of these episodes are really eye-opening, really good transitionary stories for these characters. So those are two episodes that I really enjoyed, but I really couldn't find a way to place them into my video today, so I just decided I would talk about them as an honorable mention. But that's it. Those are my categories, those are my best and worst, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do me a solid and drop a like on this video, then run over to that subscribe button and hit the bell next to it so you'll be notified every time I upload. Let me know who your favorite Boy Meets World character is, and maybe your favorite episode, or least favorite episode, or least favorite character. I would love if you would consider following me on other social media platforms. I will have them all listed in the description box below. And I think that's gonna be a wrap for me. I'll check you guys out later. Bye!